Not that kind of Christian here. Continuing with my story, The Sash My Father Wore, from chapter 6, which I have entitled Dr. Andrews. And this is part 2. It may stretch even to 3 parts, as this is a relatively long chapter. As always, copyright Anthony E.C. Linford, Great Yarmouth, and this is January 2024. I am especially dedicating and writing this story for people who are trans. We reached the surgery within 10 minutes. Soon we were both seated in front of Dr. Andrews, who was tapping his thick prescription pad with his rather smart black fountain pen. Leaning forwards in his high-backed swivel chair, he smiled kindly at me and glanced briefly at my mother. In a soft but resonant voice, he spoke. "So, James, what can we help you with today?" I felt so comfortable that I just said the first words that came into my head. "I hate being a boy, Doctor. I think I'm a mistake. I think I'm in the wrong body. I want to be a girl." Mum looked as if someone had slapped her across the face with a gigantic hand. She seemed like she'd turned up in heaven, and for one brief instant, all the angels had stopped singing. There was total silence in eternity. She struggled not to speak. Underneath her hat, beads of sweat were breaking out on her forehead. She moved in her chair, shifting her weight from side to side while tightly crossing her legs. Sitting back in his big chair, the doctor looked calm. There was no shock, no surprise, and certainly no negative reaction to what I was disclosing to him. He looked genuinely concerned. It seemed that he could somehow connect with what I was saying to him. I felt safe for once in my life. "James," he began, "how long have you been feeling like this?" Sensing I needed to reply almost before my mother burst out with something of her own, I drew a deep breath and began again, looking at Dr. Andrews directly over his oak desk. "Ever since I can remember. I don't remember, of course, being a baby, but when we first moved here and I went to playgroup, I remember liking to play with the girls' toys in the sandpit. I used to love playing house with them too, and playing kitchen. It's like it felt strange back then, but there were no demons meeting me in my bedroom like they do now." Dr. Andrews looked at my mother, and then again at me. Now, unable to contain herself any longer, my mother began her faith defense with full-on biblical apologetics. "You see, Doctor, James, that is James, myself, and my husband, and his 2 brothers, are Bible-believing Christians, and according to our holy scriptures and what James has told us, we believe he may well be possessed by a demon, or satanic forces are trying to take away his salvation and make him believe he is not a male created in the image of God. We know from the Bible God created only male and female in Adam and Eve, and anything else, like all sickness, must be of the devil. Finally, Mum ended what sounded like something she'd say when evangelising the unsaved. She drew breath as the doctor made notes on my medical record. Mrs. McCandless, with all due respect to your religious faith and hearing what you say, I'm going to ask you to step outside for a moment while I speak to James alone. If you wish, I can call for a chaperone to come here with us while you are outside. Mum replied, that will be okay, and left the room, closing the door behind her. Dr. Andrews got up from behind his desk and sat down in the chair now vacated by my mother. He was a short man who moved gracefully. I noticed he had long, slender fingers with perfectly trimmed cuticles, just like my brother Noel. He was wearing a heavy tweed jacket with leather patches on the elbows. His cuffs were also trimmed with brown leather. His white shirt sported a pair of gold cufflinks. His dark blue tie was worn in what we called a Windsor knot, displaying a heraldic shield with a Latin inscription. He smelled of aftershave, and his eyes were dark brown. He looked almost like a professor, although he was a very young man. The room felt more comfortable now that Mum had left. I felt physically more at ease as the knot inside me began to slowly untie. Looking at the doctor, I sensed he was a kind man. I could not help but contrast him to my austere Christian father, keeping the books for universal shafting, while keeping up his end for Jesus Christ, who even now was saving me from the flames of hell. James, he said, leaning slightly forward in his new chair, I'm not able to say anything about your parents' religious faith. I'm a doctor, and as with all doctors, I'm only able to deal with your physical and indeed psychological health. You might say that your beliefs and your parents' beliefs are not my concern. However, I wonder if you could tell me more about this incident your mum describes as you encountering some kind of being in your bedroom. I felt wonderfully free to talk with this man. I trusted him and felt I could say anything at all to him. I felt I could trust him more than I could even trust Noel and certainly my parents. She was beautiful. I don't know for sure, but if she was even part of a dream, I'm not sure was even asleep when she was there. Her dress sparkled like the sun on the sea. Her lips were red like cherries, and her hips were so rounded, leading up to her tiny waist. She looked like one of Amanda's dolls we played with at her house. I stopped, feeling a lump in my throat, before adding as an afterthought, but I'm not allowed to see Amanda now, because of the knickers. That's why Mum brought me to you, Dr. Andrews. She thinks there's a chance I am mad and perhaps have a demon inside me after all. She phoned our pastor first before calling the surgery. Pastor Frank and the fellowship are doing arrow prayers for me now. I so hope this is not a demon. Dad says my salvation may be at risk, and being so worldly, Amanda is drawing me away from Jesus. We'll pause there, and I'll be back with the third part of Chapter 6, Dr. Andrews. If you like, please share.